Hi, everyone. I'm Emily Russo, and I am your host this morning for Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about us at officehours.global. This is our long day today, so we are going to have our first hour spent on general discussion and media production questions. So you can enter your questions in Mukana, and we'll answer them as you vote on them. For our second hour today, we're going to do an educational lab, and we're going to return to Keynote and learn some more tips and tricks. Then we're going to spend a little bit more time on topics we love to dive deep into today, that is education. So you won't be able to watch that one on YouTube, though. You'll have to join us in the Zoom to check that out. Just as a reminder, we do questions in Mukana. So you go to Mukana, you put in your question, and you vote on other people's questions, and that's how we choose what questions we're going to answer in the order that we're going to answer them in. So make sure that you participate in that side of our show because you are the producers. All right. Well, with that, we're going to jump into our questions for today.
Sam Greenwood from Toronto, Canada. Do you think office hours should have a wiki?
Alex.
Yeah, I think that we should have something like a wiki eventually. So the main thing is that I'm not a big fan of the wiki structure. Like a lot of the wikis that I go to, I don't. It's the way it's structured makes me upset for some reason. I don't know exactly why. So I think that some organization of things that we have bubbled up as ideas, I think makes sense to put into the website. We just have to figure out what that structure is, and we need to find a team to manage it because we don't have anybody. So if someone if people want to do that, you can contact me in Discord. But I mean, we're definitely open to putting something up there, and we're looking at how to codify some of the things that we're figuring out. And I do like the idea of a wiki type thing, so that we can, and I can be persuaded that there's a better wiki, but for the ones I've seen, I haven't liked. But having something that is a living document of like, these are the 3 webcam options that we use. These are the 3 mics that we like. This is, and we're constantly changing those, I think is valuable.
Jeffrey?
I did a self wiki for a while, and it's sometimes it's super hard to really keep up on. And of course, with Wikipedia, if we have a wiki there, we have to have team members that have good standing in wiki because there's a whole community that takes down those people really quick. So if you start adding stuff to other pages and they don't like that, you can get in bad with them super quick. So that's the important thing is you got to stay on top of the regular wiki because things will pop in there and pop out, and then the verification processes also need to be enough information in there to stay into Wikipedia.
All right, next question.
From John Snyder of Reno, Nevada. Is Mac OS Monterey stable enough to be worth the upgrade yet?
Jeffrey?
I run both Monterey on both the M1 and my Intel Mac, and this is going to be it depends because it really depends on what you're doing and what programs you need to put on, what plugins you need to put on for any of the audio or video. But for me, running Zoom ISO, I run a Wirecast onto that machine. I run a couple other programs, GarageBand and things like that. That's perfect for that. But check your program.
John Pewitt?
I'm running right now, and I agree with Jeffrey. It's depends sort of thing, but I'm running an Intel-based Mac right now, and I've been having a crashing problem where my system becomes unstable and powers off after about 5 hours, and I haven't been able to get to the bottom of that. And I think it might be related to Monterey. I'm not sure. And I'm kind of technical. It's what I do for a living, and I still can't get to the bottom of it. So this is one of those things that I'm beginning to think it might be related to an instability in Monterey on Intel for certain programs that I have. So just be aware of that.
Alex?
Yeah, I'm using Monterey across the board now. I will say that I upgraded too early. When it first came out, there were a lot of problems and a lot of instability. So I probably won't do that again with whatever city that Apple chooses for the next one. I'll probably wait for a little while. But I was really excited about some of the new features and some of the requirements, and so I jumped a little too hard. I'll probably put a computer on the new one. But what I will say is after the update about a month or two ago, I would say that everything kind of started to settle in, and we're seeing a lot of, Audinate finally came out with an update to Dante virtual sound card. So that makes a big difference for us as well.
Hasmek?
Yeah, Mickey and I spent some time setting up my Apollo Solo for side tone. And the next day I was looking at Monterey and I got enthusiastic about quick notes. So I duly upgraded my machine at home, M1, and it wiped out all the settings that we had in UAD. So Mickey groaned because I upgraded too quickly. And my punishment was that I had to rebuild the whole setup on my own. So I'm still waiting for Mickey's endorsement.
I know how that goes.
So be careful. Check all your apps and all your systems, especially the key ones, after you've upgraded.
Lois?
So there's a difference between stability and compatibility. And if you have a new computer and you're running Monterey, I think it's stable. The question is, do I have some apps that are old enough that they're not compatible with the new system? So.
All right, next question.
Jonas Dattel of Stuttgart, Germany. Cloudflare just released their GUI version of Cloudflare tunnels. Should we do a second hour after hours lab on those?
TJ?
Yes, I think we should. I would encourage Jonas to put the idea into the Discord for the second hour ideas, and then everybody else that agrees with me to vote that up.
Alex?
And I just need Jonas to ping me and tell me when he's available to do the to do it, or to bring, if he has contacts there. We would love to talk about that, especially GUI version would be super useful.
All right, next question.
Douglas Carmichael, many corporations are representing return to office as the path forward. Given our accomplishments, Belfast, Mobley et al., in a remote environment, and what can be achieved with remote done right, do you think return to office is a path backward?
John Pewitt.
So I think that return to office is trying to accomplish a couple things. Number one, the people making these decisions are often extroverts because they tend to be more in the higher echelons of the corporation, as I find. And so they need people around them to be more productive. They get energy from people not being by themselves. Whereas a lot of the people who have done well in isolation are introverts, and we get our energy from being by ourselves. And so we get drained when we're around people in like a corporate setting. So that's one reason why they're pushing us there. The other reason why I think it's there is that it's simply the capital investment in the assets of the headquarters. And so they've already got the spend in their budget. So I think that it doesn't matter whether or not this is a step backwards. It's the way they think is right, because they've already spent the money. They get something from it. And so it doesn't matter how negative it is, they're going to go forward with this.
TJ.
John pretty much covered everything I was going to say.
Alex?
There's definitely valid reasons to bring people back into the office, top secret work or corporate secret work that makes sense, and physical collaboration on specific devices and so on and so forth. So I think that there is a subset of the group that needs to be in one place. I think that the problem really is that when I think the companies that are doing it right are really Dropbox and some of the other folks that are saying, hey, we have a corporate headquarters. We have spaces for you to work. You can come here or you can stay home, and, we'll figure it out. And allowing, giving people flexibility to decide they're going to come in. I really want to go in on Tuesday, or I really want to go in on Wednesday. I think that by forcing it on the employees, what you're creating is an instability for your company, because they're all looking for jobs, so the thing is that they're, that's when I talk to folks that are in some of these large corporations, they're not ready to quit over it, but they're now, suddenly their LinkedIn, profile got a lot better. Like someone paid a lot of attention on a weekend to their LinkedIn, and you can tell that they're now they're paying attention. And the problem is not just that they've staying or not staying. It's that they're thinking about going, and thinking about going reduces their productivity, because they're spending a bunch of dead time, like looking at other jobs and thinking about where they could go. And that's not a place you want your employees to be. You want them to be happy where they're at, and I think that is, so I think that that's the real danger that companies put themselves into. And there's a lot of instability, but I know a wide swath of my friends have either left because they were told they had to come back, or they're just prepping to leave, and looking for the right opportunity to leave where they were basically settled. I mean, like literally, they thought that they were going to be there for their whole career, and now they're all kind of jostling about. So I think that's the danger: is pulling them back in makes it a lot harder to hold on to them and a lot harder to keep them focused.
Jeffrey.
Being an IT manager that actually did do this many years ago, I have found that it can actually be a real pain for the IT department to get everybody up and running. You'd always get those calls, hey, I can't connect up to through my Citrix session or through my virtual session. And then those people that start thinking that some of that take-home equipment is theirs. And we had some very ugly situations where people would get fired and they would have to bring in their equipment, and they didn't, and we'd get into big lawsuits on that. There are certain departments that you have to really think about, do they need to be at home or do they need to be at work to do their job, just so that the documents stay in one central area. And I know, you could do that over the cloud, but sometimes the cloud's not always the best solution for some of this stuff. And of course, if you've got a whole team that's working on different areas, having them separated sometimes can be more of a problem than it is if they come into the office. If they come into the office like one day a week, that's a different story. But there are certain things that really need to be kept inside the office.
John?
And I want to emphasize, I went back to the office for 1 week before I had to go back out on medical. And I had zero productivity while I was in the office because people are always coming up to my desk. I had to make sure that I had a desk. I had to set up and then tear down my equipment to go, every day. Admittedly, I had a light and a microphone and a camera, and so that attracted some attention on its own. But I don't think it attracted that much attention compared to people needing to talk to me about stuff. Whereas if I had it come across on Teams or through email, I could have made my response appropriate, not distract from my day, not interrupt my work, and been able to get a lot more accomplished when I was at home.
Yeah, my job's writing intensive, and I find that working from home is easier than being in the office, because when I'm in the office, too many people stop by and interrupt the flow. Whereas I can put on my Slack, like in the flow, and people leave me alone unless it's an emergency. And then I get much more writing accomplished. But yeah, there are pros and cons to both sides. All right. Next question.
TJ Asher from Minneapolis, Minnesota. Microsoft Remote Desktop makes the remote computer's Windows desktop span all 4 monitors on my Mac. When I remote control my other Macs, it only does 1 monitor at a time and does not expand the remote Mac desktop across all 4 monitors. Any way to do this?
TJ.
So it's been a hard one for people to kind of wrap their heads around. So I prepare a brief demo here. So let me sanitize my desktop here. And let me cut over to here so you can see. Currently right now, the big red window here is my remote controlled Mac. And I only ever get 1 window from my remote control Mac. And, I can put that window on any single monitor. If I log into my Microsoft Remote Desktop session here, you will see that it suddenly takes over every monitor. And then now I have that computer has taken over every other monitor on my computer. And so I am looking to do a similar thing on my Macs.
John?
So TJ, I did some poking around while you were talking, and I can't find a way to enable that setting. I think it might be a difference in the way PCs are configured versus Macs. So you might try using VNC instead of remote desktop and see if that works better for you. Because I just think that it's not designed to do that on a Mac.
All right, next question.
Okay, Andre Dole from Berlin, Germany. Would a headless HDMI dongle provide an additional display which I could capture via NDI? How would I see the content on this virtual display to place it correctly?
Jeffrey.
A lot of times when you get something like that, like one of these headless dongles right here, it'll actually show up with a name to it. Sometimes it'll be a really weird name. Sometimes, it might even be in Chinese characters or anything like that, depending on where you buy it from. But that's how you will see it. As that name, it'll look odd, and of course you can determine from your other monitors where this is in the structure.
All right, next question.
Eddie Scott, Mission Viejo, California. What's the best bang for the buck in external NVMe Thunderbolt drives?
Alex.
I think the OWC is probably one of the best bang for your buck. I've got a couple different ones, and I think that one's probably the best one, most stable, most features, as well as we just know OWC builds good stuff as well. So I choose that one.
All right, next question.
This is from Alex Novato Alex Lindsay from Novato, California. How long does it take to earn a fixed wing pilot's license in the U.S.?
I raised my hand. Hold on.
You don't have to raise it. You're the host. You can just answer the question.
But yeah, so it depends. Weather's a big factor, but it's like 40 hours total flight time plus ground school. And I have reset my work schedule. So I work longer days, Monday through Thursday, so that I can fly on Friday afternoons. But Fridays don't always work here in Tennessee. And every time a major thunderstorm comes through, the day before is like windy as heck. And my poor little plane can't handle that much wind. So anytime the wind picks up, even though it's a nice day outside to fly, it sets me back. So I'm trying to get this done by the summer. But when
did you start?
I started a couple months ago, but it's been like false starts. Like I've gotten through, I know how to do all the checklists and check the plane. And I took the plane off the tarmac the other day by myself, which was fun. But like I haven't hit landing yet, and I haven't hit I did stalls the other day. That was kind of interesting, the plane doesn't actually stall. It just, you slow it down. It's slow flight until the horn comes on, and then you pick the plane back up so that it's not, it doesn't actually stall. I'm doing a lot of ground school now, and trying to get, anytime the weather's bad, do a lot of ground school. Anytime the weather's nice, get up in the air as much as possible. So.
I was thinking about it because there's an airstrip literally 5 minutes from my house. Like I could actually walk over there in half an hour. And and I was like, I grew up with an airstrip like my behind the house. So I was like, it's nuts that I don't. Well,
I downloaded the Sporties app, which does the ground school. You still have an instructor, but they have nice videos, and they do video collections. So you watch the videos, and then all of the books that you need are in the app. So you can highlight and write on the books. Like we own all the books, but I can, no matter where I am, like I was in the doctor's office the other day, and literally it was an hour and a half. So I did ground school while I was waiting, because it was in my phone and I could just scroll through and do the course. So I think it was like, I want to say it was like $199 or something like that, but you get all the ground school and all the access to all the books. And then you can purchase other stuff, but a lot of instructors use it too. So interesting. You should do it. It'll be fun.
Yeah. Well, I get it. It's nutty that I'm so close to an airstrip, and then it's like the municipal airstrip is like right on the other side of the hill from me. So I was taking a walk the other day, and I know this is, my wife makes fun of that I can't do anything and I can't relax at anything. So I decided I was going to start walking every day for an hour through this path, and then the maps don't work very well. So then I decided I'm using this mapping app to map all the paths in the entire over the entire reserve. So I'm walking them all, and hiking through all these things so that I can build the maps for it. And as I built the maps, I realized that I was only about 35 minutes from the airstrip, walking. so 5 minutes from driving, I was like, because in where I live, it's very hard to orient yourself to where you are. Like, it's even when we look on the map, it's hard to figure out where your house is compared to everything else. And so as I've been doing recon across all of the areas, so what I do is you leave me alone and I start doing recon. Yeah. So anyway, I've reconned about half of it so far, anyway, now part of the recon is figuring out how to fly the plane out of here if I needed a quick exfil.
Yeah, and you can buy into clubs and stuff too. So like someone owns a plane and you can split the cost of the plane or just reserve it when you want. You don't have to actually own a plane. And then you get to fly bigger planes. So my sister was visiting last weekend from Montreal, and she and my husband, I had to work one day, and they flew to Muscle Shoals, Alabama, had breakfast and came back. And like, it was just like, you went where? And they're like, Alabama. I'm like, why? They're like, because we can. I was like, okay.
No, I had a friend who flew and just decided to fly up for the weekend to Sonoma, and they just flew from LA, and they just flew up and then, hung out with some friends and flew home. And I was like, I need to.
Yeah, pretty much like, we were trying to figure out the other day, like our little plane, it's a small little plane, but you can go like 3-4 hours away and it only takes an hour. And so it's like, yeah, let's go explore other places. And a lot of places like Muscle Shoals, if you buy gas from them, you get their courtesy car for free. So you can borrow the crew car and go, visit downtown or whatever that little town is down there. So a lot of the little local airports have that courtesy thing going on. Jeffrey?
Is there a specific plane that you want to fly? You mentioned that earlier, so I was kind of curious. Me? No. Emily.
Oh.
What?
Well, I don't know, Alex. Sorry, I don't know. Are you flying planes, Alex? I didn't know that.
Well, I fly a 152 Cessna. That's what we own. But it's a little plane and it can't do a whole lot. And eventually, once I have my license and Chris gets he wants to get his CFI. So he's working on his instrument rating right now, and then he'll work on his commercial next. And then you'll be able to fly bigger planes, and then we'll think about like turning in the trainer plane, which is the Cessna, or renting it out to a flight school, and then buying a bigger plane just so we can fly further distances faster. So.
For me, P-38. P-38 is what I want to fly. So my chances are very low. so it's those planes are getting pretty old.
You'll find some though.
They're out there. They're out there, but I'd be one of those. Nope.
Yeah. Chris wants to retire doing flights out to camps in like Alaska or places like that, dropping, supply runs. And that's what you need a CFI for that, because you can't accept money until you have your CFI rating for that kind of thing. So
for some reason, I always thought it'd be a great, when I met the pilots that we worked with in Africa, it seemed like the wild, wild west. These people are crazy. They're half crazy, and they're flying around and just having a great time. Like they're just having a great, they have a great time. And you have to buzz the airfield. So they come down and they'll be like wildebeests and zebras on the airfield. On the
runway. Yeah.
And so they come down and they fly really low, and they open their window and start screaming at them and everything else. And they pull up and then they come back down and land. And it's just like, I was like, that's a crazy life, and they'll tell you day after day, statistically, you're safer in a plane, mostly because the trucks drive right down the middle of the road.
Yeah.
So you have to be very careful. And the shoulder is very low. And this for the producers, this is what happens when we don't have a lot of questions. We wander off. We wander off into the field.
We get to talk about planes.
we can totally talk for an hour no matter what, but we'll just, some of the questions will take longer.
Yeah, if you want to see some cool stuff, like go on YouTube and do bush pilots, because they'll fly in like into an airstrip, like straight down, and then flatten out and land, and you're just like, oh my gosh, like that's like crazy, but they're used to it. Like they don't have a long tree and thing. There's a tree line or something like that, and they just have to go right into it. And I'm like, wow. Roscoe?
Before you let him do it, make sure he watches every episode of Ice Pilots, because if you're going to go up to Alaska, that snow, that cold can be something to deal with.
Yeah. He wants floats. He wants everything. Like he's 100% in. I'm starting to get really interested in like additional information, whereas before I was just kind of like, yeah, I'm just doing this so when I'm with him and something happens, I can land the plane. Now I'm like, no, I want to learn more. But Lois?
Yeah, I used to fight forest fires and talk about some crazy pilots. We had to get into places where there really was no approach. And so I remember one time when we were going in and they just turned the plane on the side so it dropped. And then they leveled out to land. Just amazing stuff.
Physics is amazing. Steve?
I will concur that the Alaskan pilots are on the edge. I had an experience once. I was doing a documentary up on the building of the Alaskan pipeline, and we were flying along the route, and they had landing strips on each one of the spots, the work camps. And we're approaching one work camp, and they had a little tower, and they said, "Oh, do a low pass and check because we've had a lot of rain. There might be some ruts. It was a dirt runway, so you should check it." So he flew low and checked it. Nah, there's nothing wrong with that. Kicked the rudder, turned around, went right in. He forgot to put the landing gear down. And belly slammed the plane right into the runway. And luckily it had rained the night before because it was all mud and it absorbed a lot of the shock. And he kept claiming, "Oh goodness, the gear didn't go down," but he was just in the moment and just didn't kick it in. So you got to be careful with those pilots as well. They are good, but they can get cocky, I think.
Yeah, well, that's situational awareness. That's the one thing I'm learning about flying, is that they constantly have to be thinking ahead and checking all your checklists so that you have time and don't make decisions based on, oh, I've done this 100 times. Yeah, the 100th time you don't check, and then that's when it goes down. Hazmak?
Yeah, I got a little aviation story I'd like to share with you. Soon after the ANC was unbanned in South Africa, Bishop Tutu, the late Bishop Tutu, started traveling into Africa. And when we met him about a few months later in a little small meeting, and he was relating this story where many of the planes were not coming in from the rest of Africa into Johannesburg before that. Now they were. So he was a guest at one of the countries in north of Africa, and he got onto this plane and he sat down and he buckled himself up. And being a small plane, he could see the pilot. And he said, "Oh my gosh, it's a pilot of color." And he instinctively and immediately started praying. And he then stopped, and he was killing himself with laughter as he's relating this narrative, as his habit was. And he was saying, we were so attuned to not seeing crew of color in South Africa. And he said the rest of his journey in the rest of Africa, he had to overcome this emotion. And I thought, I cannot relate it the way he did, but he did it with great jocularity, with laughter and mirth, and he thought it was really funny. But in a funny way, he taught us that we have to think differently. So I thought I'd share that little aviation story.
That's beautiful. I'm amazed. That's great. All right. I guess we'll get back to the questions because I just want to talk about flying now. But
there could be. I bet you could do an office hours about flying. Like we could do it at least an hour, an hour a week or something like that. The flying week, and we start gathering pilots together. My uncle was a pilot for U.S. Air, and so he looks like a gruff mountain man now, but he's retired. But he'd probably have some good stories.
Yeah, The guy I'm renting from, he's a Delta 777 pilot, and he just retired, so he's got all the stories, which it's fun. Jeffrey?
Well, there's a lot of production when it comes to flying. I mean, it's more than just flying. It's you know, you see the people that take up these small Cessnas to take photos or video of their cities. We could probably use it during OH space. Well, of course, you can't be in the flight zone for whatever rocket launch, but you could be in a slight distance, or was doing some promotion or anything like that. So it is very important in some video situations to have a pilot in there.
Yeah, and I mean, in addition to that, there's a lot of really interesting accounts that I've been following between TikTok and Instagram, where different pilots get in and just do like, hey, this is something you should know. And like, I find that stuff sticks with me better than just reading it from the book, because I'm actually seeing them do it. And so, you know, I think it has a lot of possibility for production inside the plane, learning how to fly, and outside, you know, like for other events and things like that. Yeah, and Chris and my sister flew over Nashville. They got clearance from BNA to fly over Nashville and do the sightseeing. So we can now take our Cessna through Nashville, do tour. We can't get money, but we can take people when they come visit for tours over Nashville. Alex?
Probably the last comment for this one. We'll go back to our questions, back to our regularly scheduled program. I was one thing I was thinking about. I was streaming. I was in an R-22. It's a small helicopter, very, very small helicopter. Like this was a horrible idea kind of small helicopter. You know, like, you know, I'm in a bubble that's no bigger than me with some other person driving a small helicopter. And we were flying around the Matterhorn in Switzerland, and I streamed it to Facebook. And immediately, as soon as I was streaming it to Facebook from this little helicopter over a big mountain, I was like, they should do training this way. like this would be great. Like I didn't think it would work. I picked up my phone and just was like, I don't think this is going to work here, and it did. So I think like more streaming from planes talking about it would be a lot more fun way to learn.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so I guess we get back to our regular scheduled programming now. Next question.
Okay, from Douglas Carmichael, return to work protocols for the Hollywood film industry mention safety on set using zones and everything. Could you see the industry going all in on XR technology to both reduce costs and increase safety versus conventional set building?
Jeffrey.
I do not associate XR technology with safety on set. Will it be safe that they're not there? Yeah, absolutely. But when you take a person off the set, you lose all their senses on the set. So they'll have a very limited view. They won't be able to smell things. They won't be able to hear things. They won't be able to touch things. So like, for instance, in the case of Rust, somebody couldn't walk over and actually physically inspect the gun. That was the problem on there, and go for there. I think the safety on set is just a set of rules. Like, for instance, the Rust producers just got denied for another film that they were trying to produce by the Directors Guild. I think things like that, that's where the safety on set will come in. But I don't think XR technology is going to help with that.
Alex?
I mean, we'll definitely see more XR technology. It's a pretty, I mean, this is these big LED walls that ILM started building, and they're using for the Mandalorian, and now they're building more of them around the world. So these sets are definitely coming up, and will be a big part of it. They are limited in what they can do. So there's certain kinds of shots you can do with them, and a lot of shots that you can't do with them. So you know, they are a great savings, and it's less about saving money, because they actually don't save a ton of money. What they do is give you a lot of flexibility. So when you're sitting there ready to shoot, I mean, that saves you money, but you're in an Unreal Engine and you can move things around. You know, like you can it'd be better if we move this over a little bit and we did this. Now that would take a lot of people to move that thing. I had some friends that were working on Pirates of the Caribbean, and the director at one point decided they wanted to shoot from the other side of the ship. Like that was $125,000, decision. Just decide you want to put the camera on the other side of the line means that there's a whole bunch of re-rigging that has to get done, and that would have taken lunch, at in an XR set. So it could save money, but I don't think that it does save money. It gives the director a lot more flexibility, which is both good and bad.
John?
Mine's more of a question. I'm wondering, somebody mentioned Rust. I'm wondering if we could 3D print models of firearms and things like that, and then digitally replace them using XR technology, so that we could have whatever firearm we wanted to. Now, I know there are reasons for using real firearms in movie sets, such as whenever you pull the trigger and you're firing a blank, it has recoil and it looks more real. But I'm wondering if that we could create artificial weapons that have recoil without the blast and without danger to people, and that can be digitally replaced with XR technology. That sounds like something that would be a very high safety thing, and would make sets a lot safer.
Alex?
The physics of firing a gun are very hard to reproduce. I mean, that's the reason that people still use blanks. Is that when you actually look at it in slow motion, your skin ripples in a certain way when you're doing it. You're in the way, and it's a inverse kinematic, a thing where it's affecting your shoulder, it's affecting your arm, elbow, everything as it goes off. It's affecting the way your chest sits, and it's one of those things that when you're doing that, there was when you do it, there's a bunch of stuff that I've worked on that we're just using replicas, and it just doesn't. Like it just doesn't feel the same way. Maybe that's not important. But it feels like when you're watching a space movie, when they're firing lasers and they're just kind of holding the gun and stuff comes out of it. It just doesn't have, no matter what they do to try to make it look like they're doing it, it's not the same as the amount of force. And the only way to get that force is an explosive charge. There's just no other way to generate that many G's at that moment, and so you'd end up blowing something up to make it to cause the arm to react properly. So that's the issue.
Roscoe?
And I'll point out that blanks for Hollywood, blanks for Hollywood are much stronger than the blanks you would buy just for like a normal use, even for training a dog or something along those lines, because that flame has to come out the end of that gun while the shutter is open, and the shutter's not open 360. So it's something I learned the hard way. And the police officer that test fired the gun for us said, "Wow, that's loud."
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Next question.
Got to unmute again. First, Douglas Carmichael. The Roland FANTOM-0 keyboards can fake aftertouch by assigning a knob, slider, modulation wheel, or expression pedal to the MIDI message. Could a fake aftertouch be as useful as real aftertouch, considering the keyboard itself doesn't have it?
Anybody? Alex?
Well, it would be better than nothing. It's not going to be the same as an aftertouch. But the interesting thing about it is when you start to fake things, you can then start to interconnect them. There's an app that I want to bring the guys on because I don't totally understand it. I downloaded it, started playing with it, called Phase Plant. Not Face Plant, but Phase Plant. And it is it allows you to interconnect all these different things to each other. So the impulse of this affects the output of and you can just kind of tie everything together in a very complex way. And it doesn't mean you're reproducing reality with it, although they are. Like they built something that sounds like a helicopter taking off, with synths. It's a crazy thing, but so you can create new things that way. I don't know if you recreate exactly the thing that you're trying to do, but having that freedom is pretty interesting.
Lois?
Could someone define what aftertouch is?
Aftertouch is, my understanding of aftertouch is when you let go, it doesn't just stop. There's a response that things will typically have when you let them go, and it's just being able to reproduce that feeling of it. So when you hit something that's physical, it doesn't just stop when you lift your finger. Yeah.
Jeffrey?
Yeah, and that becomes very useful when you're starting to do modulation of it, like putting a reverb on or pitch bending or anything like that makes your hands free, so you can turn those other knobs and make the sound do all different things.
All right, next question.
Mitchell Hill from Wilmington, Delaware. Office hours could use some music for the credit roll. What would you suggest?
TJ.
Folks may remember Victor Cahiao, who hasn't been around in a while, but he actually wrote a theme song that we used early on in After Hours, and I think he would be willing to do so again if asked.
Jeffrey.
Yeah, the Remotes band would probably build something. I personally always try to go for And and sometimes I fail. I always try to go for original music or something that comes from something like Epidemic Sound, so I know that I have the license for it. But in this case, I would probably have somebody make something original.
Lois?
We have so many wonderful musicians in our group. Just ask them. I'm sure we'd get some really cool stuff.
Alex?
Yeah, I'd love to have someone in the band, either the band, the remote band, or for Victor or whoever would feel like they'd want to play with it. It'd be a lot of fun. I'm even open to having it be different things. Like one of the things that I want to do with the countdown clock soon is to start having us use that as kind of a creative expression. So we play with that, and we play with the close, and we don't necessarily, it doesn't have to be a static thing. And I let someone play with our open. It looks pretty good. So we're looking at a couple things there.
Jeffrey?
Yeah, when one of my shows I actually did a countdown, and I did a countdown song, and I have it somewhere. Of course, it won't work for office hours, but it was always fun. It's like, I was playing the piano and just saying, hey, this show is going to be starting in a couple minutes, and here's a little ditty for you, and things like that. Just kind of having some fun with it. So I could see doing something like that if you guys want.
Lois?
Well, I made a little opener song using bird songs. That would be fun.
That would be fun. All right, next question.
Luz Melnick of Morel's Inlet, South Carolina. Does anyone know of an iPad note-taking app that outputs via HDMI at 16:9 versus the iPad resolution?
John?
So I think it's more most note-taking apps aren't designed for outputting, like a presentation. But you can keep notes in something like Keynote or PowerPoint and then use that in presentation mode. So you could do that. And that would be my suggestion, is if you want to use that output, is to write your notes in PowerPoint or better Keynote, and then do the presentation that way.
Yeah, and I'm going to have to say that pretty much is what I was going to say. When I was in the classroom, I looked for apps, and that was a while ago. So I know that, some of it has changed, but the way it was explained to me is that all of the apps are written for the iPad. So when it gets passed out to the display, it's going to keep the resolution of the iPad, and you'd have to rewrite all of the apps, was what was explained to me by the Apple people when I kept harassing them for, a better output. Alex?
In Blue, when you're doing these notes, do you want to save those notes to that app, or do you want to be able to use it as a presentation experience?
Yeah, I should have been more clear. I really meant a whiteboard application rather than a note-taking application. So an app that I think of it as notes apps predominantly, like using the Apple Pencil, but what I'm looking for is then to output essentially a digital whiteboard from an iPad.
Yeah,
right.
So I somehow got my app into some kind of Keynote. You can do it with Keynote. I'm trying to show you the example, but I had set it up for the next week or the next thing, and it won't. I have it in some state that it doesn't work. But let me see if I can. Oh, there we go. So if I cut to this is me. That's me drawing in Keynote, and then what I do is I just so then I want to go to I just hit the button to go to the next slide. So what I do is I build like 40 white slides in Keynote. And then when I want to draw on it, I can do all the drawing that I would do in Keynote. And the pen is really nice. It's better. It's a really nice pen to do that. And so you can do all of that, and you can do it over top of your slides. So that's how I do it when I need to just do that type of thing.
Do does it save the drawings from slide to slide?
No, That's the problem. So you have to have something that's going to, if you want to save those things, you have to have something that's going to grab it, but that's what you can do, is just have something that prints like a frame grab, out of it. And then you'd be able to save that. We've used Photoshop for that as well. And what we do is we use we didn't use it exactly for a whiteboard, but you could do it basically where you have a keystroke that you save that you hook up to, you could hook it up to Isadora or anything else, where you hit a button and it just says save out, save, and then blank the screen. So it'll save out the image and clear the screen at the same time inside of Photoshop. And then you set Photoshop to full screen, no menus, and now you're in it and you're doing it. And the reason that we did that was that we were doing book signings with it. So basically it was full screen, and they would say, so they're doing it over, at the time it was over Hangouts. And you go, what's your name? And type in, good luck, really like you, the author that you're crazy about. And then we would hit a button. It would save out. It would save a layer, save it out as a JPEG, just as a precautionary measure, which saved us a lot. And then it would clear it so they could talk to the next person in the Hangout and sign their book for them. And then we would send that to them as a framed, thing. Like as a JPEG that they could put somewhere, but we would print it really nicely and send it to them as a frame. And it was it's one of those, there's some things that I've done in virtual events that have been kind of like, okay, that was magical. I haven't gone back to it recently, but it was like people were so excited to get to talk to the author and then be able to have them sign a digital version of the book. And we were able to, it was really, really good experience.
Lois?
So on the iPad, there is a wonderful little program called Sketch Club, and it's where you can do drawings and all that sort of stuff. You can choose what ratio you want, and you can do something, save it, do something, save it. So if you don't have to be streaming, like Alex is talking about doing it live streaming, Sketch Club is a very simple, easy solution to taking notes, being whiteboard.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, if you're looking to keep your notes, Notability is a really great app that has all the features that you can import pictures, you can type, you can write, you can draw on stuff. As far as the resolution goes, when you output it, I think it still comes up with the black bars on the side, but it's just nice because you can then share the file. Like you can save it and then share the file with other people if that's what you need to do. All right, next question.
Okay, from Joel from Mumbai, India. Of the two, which is better? Better option, a software-based SRT server or a hardware-based SRT decoder encoder?
Jeffrey.
99% of the time, hardware is always over software. And of course, you got to use what you have to use. The only other time I could think that software would be better than hardware is if you're shooting off-site or, doing something that's moving it off-site to another location to do the encoding and decoding.
Alex?
I generally agree with Jeffrey that hardware is almost always going to be better. The main thing is flexibility. So if there's something that you want to be able to make adjustments to the encoding and you want to make that relatively often, then software is going to give you more flexibility. And if you get a very overpowered SRT, machine to do it, I think the big problem people run into is if there's any else going on. What I do if I'm using a software to encode is I treat the computer that's doing it as an appliance for that thing. So if it's going to stream, it's now an SRT appliance. So I treat it like hardware. I don't install a bunch of other things on it. I don't put a bunch of other, that is an SRT encoder that just is software defined. And, that's, and so that I find that to be a relatively stable way to build it.
Hello everyone, welcome to another video. Today's we're going to...
There we go. Go ahead, Dad.
All right, next question.
From Hasmukh Gaijar of Cape Town, South Africa. Consistent with OBS and mimoLIVE, bringing in meters, if I use window capture meters, if Windows capture meters, sluggish like Mike checked this morning. Sorry, that sentence I'm trying to diverse. Switching to screen capture fixes that. This on 3 different computers, 2 M1s, 1 Intel. Any ideas?
Hasmukh?
Yeah, today with the mic check, I could see the meters were obviously very sluggish. So the meters were running on a remote computer. So at the end of mic check, I logged into my system at home and I changed the window capture to screen capture. And as soon as I did that, which is what's happening right now, the meters appear very responsive. Now I tested this on 2 M1 Mac Minis and another one which is a 2020 Intel Mac Mini. And it's a consistent behavior both in OBS and mimoLIVE. And I'm just lost for explanation. The reason why I prefer a window capture is so that I can, I don't have to get that screen capture grid to overlay over the meter. Window capture is obviously a lot more easier to manage. So I just thought I'd throw at the panel and see if there are any ideas.
Jeffrey?
I'm telling more and more people not to use OBS on Macs, period, because of the fact that they don't have metal according to them. They just run into way too many problems. I would highly suggest this is a perfect use for NDI because it all stays within the computer. You can do the screen capture, go into Zoom, you can tell Zoom it's coming from NDI, and it just moves it over. And the latency on the newest versions of NDI are really impressive, especially on a Mac M1.
Alex?
Yeah, I think it has to do with overhead of it's doing some kind of scaling operation or a separation operation. It's just an extra piece there. And when you add that to another video appliance on the computer, I think is probably what's causing the inefficiencies that you're seeing there. So you may be stuck with screen capture for now, but I would definitely report back to it. Definitely mimoLIVE. I don't know how fast OBS will change, but Oliver could possibly really look at the efficiencies of what's going on there. It could just be some stray, especially with Monterey, it could be just doing something extra. But it's definitely because it has to select that window as opposed to just grab. Basically it's grabbing the frames. It doesn't have to think about them. It just grabs them on a screen capture. And here it has to be more specific.
Hasmik?
Yeah, I was initially using OBS, but I found the CPU overhead was quite a bit. So that's why I switched to mimoLIVE, and I found mimoLIVE CPU overhead was drastically reduced.
Yeah.
All right, next question.
Greg McFarlane from Boston, Massachusetts, United States. What would be the minimum budget for an AV kit? Camera, microphone, light, for remote staff that would be a worthwhile upgrade from the typical laptop built-ins?
Nigel?
Yeah, so I'd probably start with the microphone first and do an MV7. I would probably add a Logitech Brio on top of that, which will get you to probably $500 either way. Then after that, depending on the room, I'd start looking at some lights. There are a lot of really cheap lights to use. I have to tell you that the Elgatos, which I use, are not great, but they're very easy to operate. They can be integrated into your phone with one button. So I think you can get a really good setup, probably for under $1,000.
Roscoe?
Yeah, under 1,000. Wow. I actually, when COVID first happened, I just put together a list for teachers. And so if you go into the Discord and education tips and tricks, there is it's called the golden list so the minimum is something like an Ethernet cable would probably be real early in the game. And then microphones, we do have microphones that improve things tremendously by putting the micro close to the mouth. They cost $15. Plus the cables, add another $15 in cables, that kind of stuff. And then what I'm looking in right now is a Brio, and I'm trying to remember. I think they're about $200 now, maybe $170. So you can get in a little bit under 500, 200, 300, depending on what you're looking to improve.
And Alex?
Yeah, I think I would probably lean more towards what the direction Nigel was going with the MV7, the Brio, the Brio's gone down in price. I think it's like $150. So plus the MV7, you're at like $400. I would get Nanlite 68s. You don't have to get the 68Bs, but the 68s. It's all going to be a little bit more pricey. You're going to get to $750 or so with an earpiece. So I think that if you're looking at something that I think that Roscoe's is definitely a great one for $200 or $300 or $400. I think for $750, it'd probably be double the visual and audio quality, but it depends on what your budget is. I think in a corporate environment, I would probably lean more towards $1,000 than, if I'm buying it myself and I'm a teacher, I'd lean towards the $300 or $400 and it'll make it infinitely better than what you had before. If I'm a corporate and especially for sales teams, like I'm kind of amazed now when I talk to sales and marketing folks who look like they do in Zoom. like you're just like, really? Like we've been doing this for a long time now, and you just want to smack them. but anyway, so I think that if I was in marketing or I'm what we would call client facing, I would be budgeting at least $1,000 for client facing personnel, and I would lean towards $5,000 for client facing personnel and put big cameras in, because these are the people who, make you money.
Yep. Yeah, I can't believe this is still a thing, that people are, not that the question is being asked, but that people are still not doing it. It just blows my mind. And
I would say at minimum, you should be doing what Roscoe's talking about. At minimum, you should have a good mic and a good light and so on and so forth. And then I just am amazed that people don't understand like how much authority and how much clarity, like you get so much out of having it. A lot of things go your way that didn't, it is so much less expensive than nice suits and nice cars. And like, it's just, and you can do so much more,
Well, I was surprised. I went to a conference last week, and it was an education conference, and it was a big name company, and it was people all over the world presenting. And I understand that there are, different issues with internet in different parts of the world, but like I literally couldn't watch 2 presentations because the audio and the video were so badly done. And I'm sure the information was great, but my skin was crawling and I was like, I can't watch this. And so I watched something that I wasn't interested in because I couldn't watch the thing I wanted to watch. So that company could have done a basic tech check and made it, like you can't present unless you can do at least this bare minimum of things. And it blows my mind that, 2 years in that this is still a thing. So,
and I have to admit, we've gotten to the point now where there's a handful of really large clients that we will still do it for. But if you're a client that we don't know very well and you won't let us send a kid out, I just turn it down. like life's too short for me to work on a project that everyone looks really horrible and sounds horrible. And I'm I'm too old to do that anymore. So I think that, because it's bad for the brand. I really think about the brand of virtual events, and when people go and watch bad virtual events, it hurts all of us, so that's the real problem.
Yeah. All right. Next question.
From Hasmukh Gajar from Cape Town, South Africa. Now that I am setting up for Dolby ATMOS, besides content I can access with Apple TV, Netflix, Apple Plus, where can I find useful ATMOS content outside of music?
TJ.
As good as streaming services are, the plastic disc known as a Blu-ray delivers an incredibly higher amount of bandwidth to your devices, and you're going to get better picture and sound. Blu-ray.com has a great list of discs that have Dolby Atmos on them. I'll post a link to that in Mukana here. Also check out AVS Forum, another great resource for those who are into the home theater hobby.
Hasmukh.
Yeah, this upgrade is to me equivalent from mono to stereo. It's such a huge leap from even 5.1 that I was listening to. It was kind of interesting when Nirali and I sat for 2 hours listening to a range of music, not whole tracks, from Ed Sheeran to the Beatles to all the latest stuff. And if she was impressed, then I'm impressed.
Alex?
One movie that I watched recently that I thought was really a good use of Atmos and Vision is Delicious. It's a French film, French subtitle, English subtitles on a French film. I'm not usually kind of the subtitles kind of person, but the cinematography was so good in the trailer that I was like, I just got to see this movie. I was like, I don't know what it's about, and it turned out to be a great movie, really good little drama, and it was, but it was impeccably shot. Almost every shot is like a painting. It's like looking at it like a Rembrandt, and so it just looks beautiful. And then what I was really amazed by is that it was also a really creative use of Atmos, And so I thought that they did a really good job.
Jeffrey?
There are some content creators that are working on putting together Dolby ATMOS. I know there's a couple of Facebook groups out there that are helping people do that. And then, of course, some YouTubes that are out there, that YouTube channels that are going. I'm not sure if Film Riot has actually made some information on Atmos, but that would be more on the creation side, and you're probably looking for content. But I think that there's also a couple top 10 lists of movies where Dolby Atmos it's exceptionally well. It's stuff that you could watch.
All right, next question.
Welcome to Daniel Ferguson of Thousand Oaks, California. Microsoft Teams questions. Aside from another computer via an ATEM Mini, what's the best way to present a PowerPoint deck that has videos with audio and have it not look horribly choppy?
John?
You don't ask much. I'm going to say there's two potential solutions, one of which I'm a little bit better versed at than the other, and that is throw bandwidth at it. Throw all the bandwidth that you can at it. Don't be behind your corporate network. That would be my first recommendation. The other one is try using, as mentioned earlier, NDI out to see if that will work towards grabbing the video better. But those would be the two suggestions that I have.
Alex?
So there's two secrets to presentations on big events that most people don't know. Number one is that almost all the PowerPoints are converted to Keynote. So like that no one tells, we don't even tell the speakers, like I'm telling you now, but because I'm not doing those anymore. But we don't tell this, we wouldn't tell the speakers that we were converting their PowerPoints to it. We would just say, hey, we're going to reconform it and make it ready for broadcast. Reconform was a nice way of saying we're going to move your whole presentation and rebuild it in Keynote so that it actually plays out correctly. PowerPoint's gotten better, but it still is chunky. The second secret is that even in Keynote, we will not play movies out of it because it's just, you're asking this app that does presentation to play videos out. And so almost all the time when we go to a full screen video, we are going to a playout system. And the way to do a playout system, if you have a switcher, is I didn't see if you had aside from a switcher, because if you have a switcher to do that, something as simple as a playout B is a great way to have like a little Raspberry Pi that has your videos. And when you're going to cut to those videos, you just press down a button. It's going to automatically play into your performance. And if you really want to get pro results, you want to get at least an ATEM Mini to push things out. Trying to do it all from your computer is never going to turn out as well as it could.
All right, next question.
From Craig McFarlane, Boston, Massachusetts. Coming from managing large IT environments, monitoring up-down performance is standard. In video production, are there tools or approaches to instantly identify an issue, reducing anxiety of troubleshooting?
Blue?
Well, first I'd wonder which type of problems we're trying to troubleshoot when it comes to video production. Are you talking about, frame rates and bandwidth and choppy video? Or are you talking about I'm not getting video from where I think I should be and it's not going to where I think it should be going? I'm sure there is for the first one, and I'll let smarter people than me speak to that. As for the second one, I think it just comes down to signal flow. I don't have anything that we use to troubleshoot video connections and signal flow outside of just constantly thinking about where's the video coming from, where's it going to, and what are the stops along the way that there could be a problem with. So that honestly just takes practice and time and time.
Alex?
Yeah, so there's a couple things that we use to test the signal. So one is a pathological signal. It's not a pathological liar. It's a pathological truth. So it's pathological SDI test pattern. It will look pink on the top and gray on the bottom, and it is extremely challenging to run through a system. And it will ring out all kinds of little problems in your system if you run a pathological signal through it. It's not just colors, so you can't just make it up in Photoshop. It's a signal that is created that sends it out. The other test patterns that we use, and it looks very simple, but it will cause all kinds of problems when you run it through a system that isn't ready for it. So a pathological test signal. The other one that we use on larger events is called the SRI Sarnoff signals. These are very specific signals that will interrogate your entire video pipeline visually. So literally you can look at something and it says, if it was ever converted to 8-bit, this will look different. If it's not this HDR, this will look different. These colors are, so the SRI Sarnoff signals are are very, very useful in that area. And then after that, I build a lot of them from scratch. But we use a lot of test signals. Other ones you want to look at is like resolution trumpets and focus testers that have smooth lines at angles, because it'll start to show you interlacing, it'll show you compression artifacts, et cetera, et cetera. So those are some of the ones that you want to think about.
All right, next question.
Alex Lindsay of Novato, California. For Blue, do you send gift packs to participants for your events?
Blue.
Yes. Do you want more than that?
Yes, more than that.
Okay, so we do it for a couple of different reasons. We've talked about this a lot over the past couple of years, but one of the biggest challenges we have with virtual events is separating them from just webinars or just a Facebook Live or something along those lines. So, and we do a few things to make sure that attendees see virtual events as events, not as webinars. And one of those things is to actually send out a physical package that includes some swag. Sometimes it includes stuff from sponsors and what have you. The main reason that we do it, there's two, but the primary reason that we do it is to remind attendees who have registered for a virtual event that the virtual event is taking place that week. So not only do we send stuff out via, usually via FedEx or UPS, never via USPS or just standard post, but we send it out via an actual delivery service that either knocks on the door or drops it at the front door or what have you. And we also don't send it out in advance. So we try to time everything, like we try to time these packages so that they arrive the week of the event so that they serve that purpose of reminding them, right? Because if somebody registers for a virtual event 2 weeks, 3 weeks before the event, and then they get the package and then the event's in 2.5 weeks, that doesn't help us get them to show up. So, yeah, we do. And incidentally, to serve that purpose, it can be an actual box, like something like this, where it's like branded or what have you. This is something that we've sent out for our events. This one's from a couple years ago, actually. But it can also just be a piece of flat swag, like an envelope or something like that. It's like you set me up for this question because I have this stuff on my desk right now. But just something like this, I also sent via FedEx. This has like a workbook in it and a few other, some stickers and some other what we call flat swag, much cheaper to send via FedEx or UPS and still serves the same purpose. So both of those things work to get your attendees to show up, because that is one of the challenges with virtual is people treating them like webinars. And still, not showing up for one reason or the other. So sending out swag or, gift packs is something that we do. And we do it worldwide listen, it depends on the client, because some clients are just like, I'm not going to ship international. We'll just ship domestically. But most of our clients will ship international, us included.
Alex?
Yeah, I really thought about it. We did it every once in a while with some of the virtual events we did, but it wasn't something that was common for us until actually Blue talked about that years ago on our show, that, we send out this little pack. And it was back when Blue was doing events for 1,000 people, we were like, he's doing 1,000 people. And then we started getting into the habit of sending lots of things out to different groups. So maybe it's just the speakers, maybe with the speakers, the speaker swag bags, we brought back, with some of the stuff. So when we send out a kit to them, we'd send out all kinds of other things for them to keep to remember the event. And that was a huge hit. Even just, we have one where you have to build this kit up. This is during COVID. And at the end, there was always a little box of cookies. It's like, you did a good job. So in the instructions, like open white box. And it was like cookies. And then so I think that there's a future somewhere where someone handles logistics of managing the international shipping, where there's a company that just specializes in swag for digital events. This is that we were talking about in the pre-show, like what's the next Bitcoin or whatever. I think things like this, like handling logistics for digital events, that I'm going to send you physical things and I can do it to 160 countries or whatever, and you send it to a central place and we know how to do the logistics of getting all of your swag to anyone in the world, I think is it's a business somewhere. I'm not going to do it. I don't like logistics. I do like
that sounds that sounds horrible. But yeah, no, I'm with you. And
but that's the thing is, if something is doable but horrible, and you figure out how to make it efficient and you make it easy for everyone else to do, that's usually a good business model.
Yeah, for sure. And the other thing just to keep in mind, if you're thinking about it these days, everything is taking longer, right? So what used to maybe take 3 weeks to prep now is taking 6 if you're lucky. So, and one of the, for a lot of our clients, I don't know what you guys see, but most of our clients, the majority of their registrants for virtual events, where in person, it used to be like 4 weeks, up to 4 weeks before the event is when you would start to see a dwindle in your registration. Now for virtual, it's like you don't see anything until, 3 to 4 weeks before your event. And then all of a sudden your registrations spike. So it's, there's a lot of gambling going on. We're prepping an event right now, and I am making sure that everything we put into the piece of swag is evergreen. So, because I know we're over ordering, but I also don't want to under order and have people complain about, oh, I didn't get my thing. So we're making sure that it can be used for the next event for the same client.
Right.
Nice. There was a follow-up question really quickly about logistics. Like, how do you use something to help you plan the mailings, like so that you don't forget 3 weeks out or whatever?
Unfortunately, it's not all that hard. If you're going with FedEx, they have 2-day, 3-day, and ground, which is usually somewhere between 2 days and 5 days, although ground is taking a little bit longer right now. So it just depends on where it's being shipped from. And if you are shipping 2-day or 3-day, it doesn't matter. So we try to schedule, I know where the stuff, when we ship stuff out, I know exactly where it's coming from. Our vendors in California, although you should probably pick somebody mid-country to save on shipping. So our vendor in California, we take all of our West Coast stuff and ship it FedEx ground, usually 6 to 7 days, shipping days before the event, with the hope that they get it 1 to 2 days before the event takes place. And then we deal with last minute shipping using 3-day, 2-day, and then overnight even for people who register a couple days before the event. So cool. It's just taking a look at shipping times, which with FedEx and UPS is pretty decent.
Yeah, that would make sense why you don't use the USPS. All right. Well, that wraps up the first hour of our general questions. We're going to get ready to do Keynote. Are we going to jump right into that, Alex, or do you need a minute?
We can talk through it. Yeah, absolutely. I probably should have been. I still saw the other questions, so I was like, oh, we're going to keep going. And again, we can. For those of you who are new to Makana, when we get to the top of the hour, we went a little over because there weren't a ton of questions for Keynote yet. If there were 15 questions for Keynote, we would have stopped right at the top of the hour to make sure that we got to them. When there's very few questions for the second hour and it's just an internal discussion, we'll oftentimes go over by 10 or 15 minutes when we have the questions there. But if we didn't get to your question, we pushed it back to you. So if you're new to Makana, I just have to do this announcement every once in a while because I realize people don't know what happened to my question. It goes back to you. It's in your notes in Makana, and so you can ask it tomorrow. Fortunately, we're here 7 days a week. So, or unfortunately, we're here for 7 days a week. So anyway, you can go ahead and push it back in. We'll talk about it tomorrow morning. Remember that we don't record Sundays, and so you may, if you're not going to be here for the answer, then wait until Monday to push it back in. That way, it'll be codified, in the piece. So, yeah, there you go. So I guess I'll talk a little bit, and then we'll jump into questions. So if you have questions about Keynote, this is really an experiment. We're kind of shifting gears here. I don't have any. I have one thing planned to show about how I approach building these documents, and then we will go to. And I've talked about it a little bit, but I thought it'd be useful to show how I do it. And then we'll go into your questions, and then when we run out of questions, we will take a break and we'll go and get ready for the educator. So it doesn't have to be exactly 45 minutes long. So anyway, so the main thing is that I kind of wanted to explain, I've talked about it before, about how I build a lot of documents. So in Keynote, and I wouldn't say that they're very complicated. So sometimes the new features I'm a little slow to because mostly mine are just images on screens, but there is a very specific way that I build Keynote documents. The first thing that I do, and I'll show how I do it here, is I do an outline. And I know that, you'd think that I'm so ADD that I that I wouldn't do an outline, but I can't think any other way. I need to think through it. In fact, a lot of times when I'm thinking about a presentation, I'll sit there and try to talk it through myself. Like, this is what happens, and then this, and then this, and then this, and then this. And then when I sit down to do the outline, it's almost always like there. Like, I'm just going to do, I just start writing it. It's like almost a stream of consciousness that I do and I'll show that in a second. And then I sketch the sketch. And you can see that I don't write very often anymore. So I don't even know if it's worth doing that. So anyway, I don't write words very often anymore. So my brain is going, what are you trying to do here? And anyway, and then I build the document. And so, but all of it is inside of Notes and Keynote. So, if you look at it here, let me see if I can, I guess I'm just gonna, sorry, I'm just trying to figure out the best way to show this. So this is, I'm in Notes, and so I'm gonna, I know it looks very small here. Hold on, let me see if I can make that bigger. I don't know what it's gonna do. So anyway, so if I'm gonna start typing, I'm gonna be like, this is the intro. The plan, global domination. No, we'll see. Support. And then we do, this is the key aspects. So I will do this, and a lot of times I will have here like, what is missing. How we fix it, that kind of thing. This is how every presentation that I do starts. Like, it is, I don't sit down. Here's the reason I think that's so important to talk about is I never sit down in Keynote and start building slides, ever. Like, it's a tar field to do that. And here's why, is that you have to get the thread. This is why everybody's keynotes stink. No, I mean, I'm sorry, not the only reason. But this is one of the reasons that this is why people say, oh, I hate watching presentations, because what happens is when you build a presentation inside of whether it's PowerPoint or Keynote or whatever, when you build it inside of there, you'll lose your thought process. You'll lose your thread. You have to maintain the thread, because you start working on this first slide, and now you're trying to find the photos, and now you're trying to find, now you're deciding on what font and what color is the font and what is this thing and how does it look, and should I snap it to the left or should I put it in the center? You don't want to be thinking about that when you're trying to tell your story. You have to tell the story first. So you want to write these things down in Notes to put those in. Then the next thing I do, and this is, I'm gonna now have to make that text smaller again. Hold on. So the great thing about Notes, again, we're talking about Keynote, so I'm assuming you have Notes on your computer, is Notes are shared with all your devices. So what happens is that when I go to do this in Keynote, the next thing I do is I never sketch my keynotes out on my computer. I always do it with my iPad. So what I do here is so here, if you look at this, so what I've done is I've split the screen. So I have, this is going to be very meta here for a second. So I have, this is Notes and this is Keynote. So I basically dragged out. So now I have the notes that I was going to build on in one segment of my iPad, and I can move that, I can of course decide how much I want to see by just, moving back and forth here, right? So I can have that opened like that. And so now I have my notes running down the side of this, and this is where I start to sketch. So, I'll say, this is, I'll say, and literally it'll be like intro, and then, I'll go to the next slide, and I'll have I'll do my little sketch, that is going to be like the global support and, big, a big question mark, what's missing, and then, And then I'm going to say, oh, I'm going to have a box, here that's going to go like this. And then I'm going to do this, whatever that is. And so basically what I'm doing is I'm going through each one of these and I'm going to say, this is this, and it's going to be logo. It swings across and then goes up or something like that. But that's all I'm doing in this sense. The key is you're moving through the idea and you're hanging on to the thread. The thread of your presentation is everything. There is a thread. Just go to another slide. There is this thread of your presentation, and you got to keep it going like this. And what happens when you don't do it the way I'm talking about it, you do this. That's what happens because you were paying attention to each slide. And a lot of that has to do with, the reason that insects go around, the reason that this is an important little thing to remember. The reason that insects go around lights, all the insects go around the light is because they use the sun to navigate. So with the insect, if you keep the sun on one side, they can go straight, right? They can go somewhere, they can navigate. The problem is that they didn't evolve when lights existed. And so what happens is at night, and they can do the same thing with stars, when they are really, really close to the light, they put the light on the right side of them and they go like this, right? so that's why insects get very lost around electric lights. And so the reason I bring that up is that when you pay attention to every slide, you're going around it like this, and so the thing is that, and it's just the thing that I see. It's probably the number one mistake people make is they get caught up in their slides and they don't go through that. Now, when I'm done with the sketches that I did, and I find that the easiest to do the sketches inside a Keynote. So I do notes to do the outline. Then I do Keynote. I draw off those sketches. And then the last thing I do is I bring it back into my Mac. I start grabbing onto things. And the reason I bring it back into my Mac is because Keynote, I love Keynote and I love my iPad, but it is not a great, in my opinion, not a great solution for trying to add images. It takes too long to get from Safari into it. And I will say that it is the connection. By the way, I specifically use Safari with Keynote as opposed to Google Chrome because, and I'll show you here. I think I can show you this. Hold on. And the great thing here is that all the things I just sketched. So I'm going to see here. I just want to. Just give me 1 second here. All right, so when I'm building these, I may go back and buy images, but I don't buy them when I'm trying to think through the process. And so let me see if I can figure this out here. Hold on. All right. Oh, I can't do that. Hold on. I'm afraid that I tore my system apart for the scopes thing we did earlier this week, and I've been grappling with it ever since. I'm desperately trying not to upgrade before my studio arrives, hopefully next week. Just want to. All right. So I opened this in my Mac, and all those funky sketches that I did, I happen to like the crayon, by the way. It's the one that I generally use for my layout. I'm pretty picky about it. That thickness is just the right thickness and just the right, and I like the crayon look. Anyway, so I spent a lot of time fiddling with that, by the way. Anyway, so I do them, but all this came in on my Mac because, of course, I saved my iPad saves out to my iCloud account. So I literally just open up Keynote, go down. And what's nice is that as I update this, it'll update on my iPad so that I can sit there and keep on sketching over things back and forth. Now, the main thing is that, okay, so I have an Earth. Now I have a planet. One of the things that I did here is you'll see in my shapes, I have a version of, I call it US Light and Earth Light. So there's, and the difference between my version and the one that comes with Keynote is there's no Antarctica, because no one ever needs Antarctica in their presentations unless they're talking about global warming. So when you want to show the Earth, you don't need Antarctica down there. And so what I did is you can basically right click here. Is it right click? Yeah, make editable right here. When you make it editable, not edible, don't eat your map. You can now select points. So if I decide I don't want to have Hawaii in there, I can select it here and sorry, Hawaii, you're gone. And then I can let go of it. And so that is, but I did that also with, and I actually did that with, in my shapes, I have a US Light because I use these a lot for logistics maps, and it had a big like Alaska and Hawaii down here, which I don't need, for the most part. I mean, if I'm going to include them, but they're in the wrong place, even if I was going to include them. So anyway, I cut those out, and you can save those then to your shapes, to your own shapes, rather than, that way you can fix ones that you use often. So I might have something like that here, but maybe I want a box or a plane, here. If I go into Google here and one of the first things that I do in Google search is I set my size to large. It's a big mistake people make. And now these top ones are, so anyway, so I have, so I might want to grab these, but I might say I want the airplane white background. So now I have all these ones with white backgrounds here. This one even looks like it might even be already pinged, but we'll just grab one of these. So, so let's grab onto, and again, I'm not worried about whether they have things over top of them because I'm just doing an example. So if I grab this now, if I grab this plane and I drag it from Chrome into here, that's what I get. That's super annoying. And so if I go in here, let's see, this is in Safari. Oh, I didn't say white background, so I got something completely different. There's a little Cessna. All right, so then we have this here, and I can simply grab this and drag it over, and I get the image. So that came in as the image that I wanted. So you can drag from Safari, but you cannot drag from Chrome. And the other thing is that Safari will always give you JPEGs or pings or whatever, and Chrome will give you WebM, which is not something you can use in Keynote. Not that I'm bitter. Hit Instant Alpha, and I just pull this until it gets rid of everything. I pull Instant Alpha until I see it eating into my foreground, and then I pull back until it goes away. But that's how you get the most of everything you wanted it to remove, except for that. And then you let go. And again, I'm going to go back and buy an image whenever I decide to talk about airplanes. And now I have my image. So now I start roughing things in, here. And then I'm going to, grab my shape. Let's see, I'll go to basic. Now I'll either do something like this where I grab this and pull it over. The thing that I like to do a lot is if I have a shape here and I select these two, then I'll say connect them. And then I can, and now this is the one problem with the connect is that it connects to some part of it. So it's a little harder when you're using images. So you might have to do something there, but we'll just leave it there for now. Then I can grab this and make it, thicker. I can also give it an arrow, that type of thing. So those are the kind of things that we can kind of play with, in that sense. So those are the kind of things, and this is just nice because it stays connected like OmniGraffle, to make that work. Anyway, then what I do is I start mapping those things out. But the key is now I can pay attention to all these details, and I can pay attention to what I'm doing because I already figured out the thread that I wanted to tell. And that's what I think that people miss a lot is they get caught up in building the slides or building, or even sketching the slides before they outline it. And it takes a lot longer to get through that process. Anyway, so that's all I got for my little presentation. Emily, I don't know who's asking questions.
I can ask a question.
Okay. Yeah.
Let's see. So the first question is from Tommy. Moves Chans, and he wants to know. He's in St. Paul. He wants to know what's the best way to get presentation to a projector. Chromecast a viable option?
A Chromecast to a. The best way to do that, in my opinion, is well. I'll go ahead and let. Oh, I guess I don't want to answer. Yeah, go ahead. Roscoe could go first.
Yeah. Well, I would just say an Apple TV. That's what we've been using. Yeah. We just love getting a presentation to a projector. All our projectors in my department have Apple TVs tied to them, and it just works. So I would just say that for me is number one. It allows anyone to walk in with a laptop. I'm trying to think. There is a protocol by which they have to sign in, and no one else can take control. I'm sorry, there's a password involved. So no one else can take control of that Apple TV unless they're in the room, and that password is projected on the Apple TV screen, and that allows them to lock in and not allow someone to hijack it.
Yep. Alex?
Yeah, 100%. Apple TV is the way to do it. Apple TV for a presentation is just a great solution because you can present your phones, you can present your iPads, you can have people connect to it. If you're in an Apple environment, it works extremely well.
Yeah, and if you're hardwired to a projector, so you've connected your computer, you can control your Keynote from your watch or from your phone from an app, so you can still move around the room.
Yeah, and the one thing is that even with a switcher, a lot of times, even if we have everything hardwired, we often have an Apple TV connected to the switcher, like into our ISO Extreme or whatever, because it gives us kind of a wild card. Like someone isn't ready to go, but they can just have their computer jump onto it.
All right. Next question comes from John Snyder in Reno, Nevada. What are some techniques you have learned recently that level up your presentations?
I think not. Oh, am I running this one, or am I?
I guess so. Or if anyone has any.
Nigel.
Yeah, so I've just been through my quarterly board of directors meeting, which is a ring of fire you have to run through every so often. And our board is some remote, some local, so there's always going to be a deck of some sort. And I've always got to get a group of people working on that deck. And I wanted to re-emphasize what Alex was going on around writing down the charts, what I learned to call the red line for some reason. And actually, the first thing I do is I do that as a group exercise on a shared document. So I get all the people who are going to do the presenters, and we write down not only what the title of every chart is, but actually what the point we want the chart to make. What do we want the person seeing or hearing to walk away from? And I found if I do that as a group exercise, what happens is by the end of the half hour, we have 307 charts. And then we go, oh, okay, that's far too many. So now let's step back. What are the important? Let's prioritize. What are the key messages? And that is a group exercise on a whiteboard, on a shared document, will zoom you past somebody's job of consolidating decks that really make no sense, that don't really link, that meander off. And it also saves the presenters a lot of time producing content they don't need to. And so you can do it on your own. It's much easier to do it on your own. But as a shared project, you'll get a much better final deck when you've got multiple presenters in the path.
Yeah, the big okay. I'm confused.
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah. So anyway, the big thing I'm working on this presentation that I can't show right now, but one of the things that I'm really that I've been playing with inside of Keynote is this integration of video. It's not just just one thing or another. So it's not just video inside of a little window, and it's not just full screen, and it's not, it's a mixture of, and what I've been experimenting with. And it's funny because it's only like 12 or 15 slides. It's a very simple document, but I'm playing with the idea of objects coming down. I grabbed the wrong pen. That's what happened here. Objects like flying down next to me to say some things. And then in other areas, I'm a circle down in the corner. And in other areas, it's full screen with that maybe me up here, or even not me there. And so the idea is I'm really thinking through the entire framing so that it's this mixture of it. And what I found is that I have to be in, because of the audio delay and everything else, I have to do the whole presentation from inside of Keynote. So that's the thing that I have to kind of figure out how to do is I can't jump out of Keynote because my audio delay changes. And so so that's what I've been kind of fiddling with. And it's and I'll try to show something in the future that shows that that kind of, once I finish this one I'm still experimenting with it. So I'm like, oh, I don't like that, or I like this. The other big thing that I've been doing is playing a lot with the integration of motion with Keynote, and how that works for me is that I'm using more and more USDZ files, so 3D files. And what I can do is I can do it either in motion, because I can export it out with an alpha channel, or I can do it in even preview. And so I open up these USDZ files, rotate them to where I want them, and then capture them and send them out to Keynote. And the advantage of that is that I can now have lots of objects that are exactly where I want them. They're not clip art that was kind of the direction that I wanted it. They are exactly what I want it to look like. And I've been building diagrams, with those ongoingly.
All right. Next question is if you use the Boolean tools to cut a picture into a certain shape, put a circle over an image and subtract, can you move the picture within the shape like a crop mask? I learned PowerPoint can do this earlier this week and wondering if it works in Keynote. And I'm sorry, this is from John Snyder in Reno, Nevada. Anybody?
Yeah.
Alex?
Yeah. So let me see if I can do this really quickly here. What you want to do is you don't need to use the Boolean for that. What you can do is you should be able to, let's see if let me share this here. What is it? I have my computer in a very confusing state right now, so we'll so if we go back to the airplanes that we were looking at earlier, probably do this in, sorry, I just got to get this set up here. So and I'm doing this off the cuff, so we'll see. We'll see how it goes. But if I have an object here, if I have a shape, any shape here, what you should be able to do is you can have this shape here like this. And there is a big advantage to doing it this way because you get more control. So if I take this airplane and I drag it onto that shape, you'll notice now that it's in the shape. So that you don't have to do the Boolean to get there, and I can hold down my Option key and scale it down. So now I can have it, in the shape there. And the advantage of that is that you have limited, so that's already built in there. And now when you do it this way, you have the traditional border tools that you would normally have that are there. So you can say, I want this to be here. Let's make it a little lighter, make it a little smaller, give it a drop shadow. That kind of thing is all possible. And you get less of those controls if you try to use the image. And again, if you double click on it, you can keep on moving it around. So it's a matter of dragging the image into the, it's a matter of dragging the image actually into the shape that you have, as opposed to using it as a Boolean. It'll work better.
All right, let's go to our next question. Tommy Chance in St. Paul, he wants to know, is it difficult to convert a PowerPoint to Keynote? What might the tough bits for a newbie to grasp?
It's the animations. The animations are the hard part because they're, everything else is, so there'll be a couple of things that happen. You'll open up a PowerPoint in Keynote and all the framing. What you want is someone to print out you want them to send you a PDF and the document, because you have to get all the mapping correctly. So the fonts will be different. Sometimes the layout will change as it goes through the system. And so you have to go back and, kind of correct all those things. You want to ask what those fonts were, of course. And then the big thing is if people, fortunately for us, that a surprisingly small number of people, like literally 5% or less, actually use any animations in PowerPoint. Almost all of the stuff is them just an incredible amount of text in every slide. So a lot of what we're doing is when we conform it, we're not just conforming PowerPoint to Keynote. We're also kind of re-justifying everything. So one slide from a PowerPoint presentation, we might build out into 5 or 6 slides in Keynote. And that's not a technical thing. That is a creative, like, wow, you put way too much text on that slide, And so, and we try to tell people, I mean, like 20 words is the most. I will not, it'll be very, very rare that I put, and I used to, but I've now gotten to the point where I just make new slides with new images. You really, the big thing is that there is a note section in Keynote and PowerPoint. That's where your notes should go. You should not use your slides for notes, period. Figure out how you're going to set up a 2-monitor system and be able to look at your notes and talk about them if you need that. What I do is I rehearse my presentation to a point where I don't need any notes. So I know I see the image and I know what I'm going to say. I'm not saying it exactly. I'm not, it's different every time. And here's the thing. It's not only different every time, it's better every time. So when you write down notes, you have now poured concrete on your presentation before you've done it very many times. Your presentation isn't very good until you've done it 10 or 15 times. And so you don't, when you write it all down, you've now poured a bunch of concrete onto no form, and it's just spread out all over the place. And so what you want to do is you want to practice it in front of people without notes, just with maybe just a couple words to remind you of the things, there might be the points that you want to say. And I admit I grew up with a father that spoke a lot, and he would have a note card with 6 words on it, and he would talk for 45 minutes. And it was all salient. And so the thing is, but that comes from knowing the subject matter and also understanding what you're going to say and having a real good thread. But the big things that are hard is when people start. It's the people who actually use PowerPoint a lot are the people that are the hardest, because they'll build a bunch of animations, and oftentimes they're super cheesy, so like they're just a cheddar deck is what we call it. so anyway, that's the problem that we usually get into, in my not so politically correct way of describing decks. Be very careful, of all the transitions that you can put into things. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. And so I use a lot of blow through transitions between slides. I like that. I like it to go towards you and then come up with the next thing. And I like little things to slide in, because the other thing that I pay a lot of attention to is I don't want you to look at anything until I'm talking about it. So I never give you a slide that has information about the past, or much information about the past, and definitely not information about the future. So if I want everything to appear as I'm talking, it just appears as I'm, it bink, 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 bink. And how that comes in, sometimes I want it to be subtle. I want it to just kind of fade in. Sometimes I want it to make a point and I land in it. Those are all the things that I do. And sometimes it just appears. So it just depends what you're doing there. But it's more about creatively fixing presentations than it is the conversion process. Again, the animations are the hardest part, animations and fonts. But it's really fixing the display of what they did.
All right, next question. It says, it's from Glen Mead in Waterloo, Ontario. Has anybody discovered a way to use a virtual camera as a live video source in Keynote? My testing so far has shown that the live video only works with a physical UVC, USB video class, webcams, and devices like Elgato Calming 4K, etc. Alex?
And that has been all of our experiences. I think that it's actually the number one deficiency of this right now, is that you need something, some physical device to go in and out of Keynote. I think that Keynote should be able to see virtual, and it should also be automatically generating its own virtual camera out to make that work. So I haven't seen another way to solve that yet.
All right, next question comes from Douglas Carmichael, and he wants to know, would the web presenter or an ATEM Mini be the most effective tool to bring non-camera live video sources into Keynote? Alex?
It's definitely the way that we're doing it, is to use the Mini. And one question that I did have about the last one is, I don't know whether mimoLIVE couldn't theoretically see things that were there and then pass them into Keynote, although it could be somewhat resource intensive. It could possibly, show up as a webcam. It could be eCam or mimoLIVE or something might be able to be used as an in-between to become a camera inside of Keynote. And I don't have the answer for that. But yeah, you can also, for non-camera video, live video sources, that's definitely what we've done is the minis have been what we've used there.
Roscoe?
I'm trying to think what a non-camera live video source would be. It'd probably be something that'd be also good to either have a Pi from Jonas or maybe a HyperDeck there to play it back through.
Well, it could also be another computer, like if a computer that you're presenting.
True.
And so that's what we've used it for. Is I might have 2 or 3 computers that I'm going to show a web page. I'm going to show the app. I'm going to show those kinds of things.
All right. Next question comes from John Snyder in Reno, Nevada. Can Keynote export slides as animated GIFs or GIFs, depending on who you listen to?
I think it's GIFs. I think that the founder died.
GIFs from the founder, yeah.
And they made it very clear that he believes it's GIFs.
He passed away this week.
He did.
Yeah.
And the answer is yes, but I've never done it. So it's there. There's a whole bunch of features to export an animated GIF, but I have never exported an animated GIF. So I can't show you the operation other than I know it's in Keynote. It's one of your export options, and you can set the frame rate and all kinds of other fun stuff. But we'll have to try to test that. That might be a fun little lab. We can go ahead and jump into the next question. I'll see if I can do something quickly with it.
Okay. Next question comes from John Pewitt in Huntersville, North Carolina. I work in a corporate environment without access to a photo library on my work computer. What's a good way to include better graphics for my presentation? Nigel.
Yeah, I was going to point out that even in a corporate environment, you probably have a marketing team or a graphics team that probably has access to a library. And if it's for internal use only, you'll probably, if you ask them nicely, get access to it. And that's what we do for lots of our stuff. I also have to tell you that unless your company guidelines specifically deny it, if that presentation is for internal use only, then I would use graphics I grabbed from the web. The one exception might be if I was creating materials for the sales team or for the marketing team, which might leave the bounds of my work, then I would go and get licensed stuff. But I'm guessing your marketing department probably has access to that library.
Roscoe?
Instant Alpha is your friend. Whenever you grab a graphic, since you bring it in, you run it through Preview or Keynote or Pages even. Instant Alpha's there. It allows you to remove the backgrounds, clean up the graphics. That's a good tool.
Yeah, and John Snyder just put a whole list in Mukana. If you guys check it out, it's a really great list of free stuff. Alex?
And much has been made about it, as Nigel said. In most corporate environments, if you're doing internal things and not going out to the outside world, Google search is a pretty popular tool to make all that stuff work. Most people start with those things. And again, I tend to, if I'm going to show it to anyone outside the company, I will always buy everything. But what I do is I sketch it all out with things that I just found on the web, and then I just go back and I backfill the ones that I actually use, so I don't go over it. Also, I just did the test of the animated GIF. I will show this really quickly. So all I did here is this is just hitting. I just have oops. There's my little animation there, and so that was just to show that I just did an action and gave it a quick animation, and then I went into I go into export to animated GIF, and I can set its auto advance to a certain speed and frame rate. I have 3 choices here, and then I hit next, and there you can see one that I tested already, but it works, and it'll just it'll export that out, and then you just let's see here if I got so many things on the. So if I click on this, you can see the little animation there. So it works. So it definitely, you can definitely export GIFs or GIFs. I've said GIF for 20 years, but I'll try to move to GIFs.
GIFs. All right, next question. It comes from Daniel Ferguson in Thousand Oaks, California. What are your most used Keynote transitions or animation effects, and which do you stay away from? Alex.
Mine are generally simple, simple things like fades. I like the the slide transitions, the push through slide transition or move through slide transition. I love Magic Move, where you have objects that are you're moving from one transition to another, and it's moving all the objects out of the way or moving them all over to something else using Magic Move. Those I love things that are subtle that just happen. I hate anything that's sparkly or has clouds or explosions or to me those are all the things that's like the lens flare of presentations. So I try to stay.
And the typewriter, as a teacher, stay away from the typewriter. I hated that in presentations.
So slow. Yeah, exactly.
So slow.
Just get to the point. Yeah, exactly.
All right, next question. Comes from Brian Anderson in Silver Springs, Maryland. I use Keynote for a lot of quick motion graphics. I just ran into a bug when exporting ProRes 4444 on a MacBook Pro M1 Max running Monterey. Keynote hard crashes immediately. It works fine on Intel. Does anyone know if it's just M1 Max or all M1s?
I don't know. I don't have an M1 set up for this right now, but I'm definitely going to test that. That's a really interesting issue. I would definitely send a radar to Apple, and so that would be by radar. I mean, I would go to in Keynote. There's a send feedback, which I use a lot. You don't have to fill out if you're doing a bug report. You want to fill out all the things that they ask you for on the send feedback. If you're just doing a feature request, I skip most of it. So which I make lots of feature requests. So there's like this constant. You can always tell I'm in Keynote because I'm sending feedback. So like, it'd be really good if I could move this over. It'd be really good if I did this. Anyway, but if you're having a bug, fill all those things out. Apple does read those, and especially something that's crashing, it's important for them to know.
All right. Next question comes from Dan Maliska in Nelson, British Columbia. How do I export an image that is Dolby Vision compatible HLG for use in FCPX? It's alphabet soup, Alex.
yeah, exactly. So I think that what you want to do is the big thing is when you're exporting that Keynote only that I know of, Keynote only works in Rec 709. So Rec 709 is the standard curve. It's the standard just straight line that you'd have in exposure. And of course, what you're talking about is something that does this. And so this conversion here can be easily done inside of, as long as you have enough bit depth. So if you have Emily, your mic's open.
Sorry.
If you have, and you type really loud, it's like you're hurting the keyboard. So anyway, so what you want to do is with this here, you can make this conversion if you have enough bit depth. And I think that if you export out of Keynote with TIFFs, you'll get a higher bit depth than I haven't done this out of Keynote, but I've done it in other places where you want to export out like 16-bit TIFFs or whatever, and then you're going to end up with enough bit depth to make that conversion later from 709 to Rec 2020.
All right, next question. We have Dave from Alexandria, Virginia. That curve that Alex used to connect the plane and the circle, is it possible to add more anchors to that curve within Keynote?
You can't. There's no way to do magnets like you can that I know of. There's no way to do a magnet that will do what you can do in OmniGraffle. That's the big thing. In OmniGraffle, we have magnets that'll do that. Let me cut to this here. So I'm starting to get. Oops, now I do it. I felt so smart there for a second. So if I grab onto something here. Usually what I end up doing is just doing this. And then I have this thing about liking them to curve just a little bit. I think they look nicer that way. They curve a little bit on the automatically, but that's how you do that. And then you can grab all of them and you can go into their format and give them arrows. It does matter which way you click to get the arrows in the right place. It's the direction that they were drawn. Used to not be that way. It used to be like random. Anyway, so Now, one thing that you can do, if I remember correctly, is you can put, I haven't done this for a while because I've gotten in the habit of just letting it do it because this takes a little longer. So if I put this here, and I'm just making this as an example, and I take, say, no fill, and I take this and I go like that, and we'll take, there's no border there either. I can play. No, it doesn't work. I thought I had this set up. I think I just had it sitting over top of it. So I would have little objects that were sitting over top of this object that I could snap to that would create a pseudo snap where I wanted that to go. And then I can move that little box around. It's like a little null. Grouping it obviously doesn't work, but I used to just put little boxes where I want those things to go. It actually works better than grabbing onto the end of the lines. It's a weird thing. The end of the line was hard to grab onto, but if I made boxes that had no fill and no border, they were just easier to grab onto and move them to where I want them.
All right, and what looks like our last question for today on Keynote is from Roy Meyer in Bel Air, Maryland. Alex, can you show us a real-world presentation or sanitized version thereof and run through that with us, perhaps in another session?
Yes. I'm trying to do that. The problem is that my day-to-day use of it is usually around the things that I do for work, and those things are not something that I have lots of paperwork that says I can't show what those are. So so I'm trying to get to a point where I have enough time on Keynote to do some of those other things, but I don't have. I need to. I'd like to show some real-world ones, but they're usually all pretty papered up.
Roscoe?
Sorry, I had to find my unmute. I've got one if you want me to throw it up and we can mess with it. I don't know if Dennis is on the back end. Let me know if it's...
Yeah.
All right. Is it running? You guys can see this?
Yep.
So this is just a quick thing from OH Space. And so what we got going here, these are, if you look, the bicycle is rolling backwards because Bill's amazing on a bicycle. But so here's a drone shot from overhead. Use the magic move to turn it that way. Wanted to show the location of where people were. This is our main talent, Braden. This is where John Preto was under the tent building his rocket. Tuomo was in here with graphics. Doug was here teeing and cutting the show. Jeff was master control. Jeff Keithley. Greg was in this trailer here. Chris was in the back end of Chris Widner's trailer, and Sky was next to him. They were cutting the show from there. Johnny Preto was manning a camera. I was stage managing next to him. Ash was there. So this is just, I don't know if this is helpful. And then we have them. Oh, Vienna's there too. Vienna was on a large screen, so we could look over and see her. And then we also had some cameras out near the flight line. That was Jeff's son. And Jeff. And then we had Lana, and we had Eric was on a camera with wireless running around. Noah was stage managing behind him, running the whole thing, and Bill was there. We also had a couple of drones run by Jack and Chris Widner, and then Peter Rosato was taking care of remote communications. He actually parked over on the trailer. So then we do this. This is a magic move again, just moving between slides. We have a little bit of an animation here showing the drones running around. It gets a little funky, but it was just and this is the shot that we got from the drones. Whoops, let me go back to that one. That was a really great shot. Shows all the antennas that were set up on top of cameras, kind of it's where people were tucked away underneath. And this is the shot we got from where the camera was under the tents, and there was Vienna out of Australia. And then I'll stop here real quick because then the cameras went away. They all went, the talent went over. We got this shot from Jeff and Doug inside the Tesla. Another angle of that. And then they came back. So basically this was here to just show where the cameras went and what the shots were when we got there. Then the cameras came back out. We got this shot. And they moved again. Eric, the E, is the camera person. So then we shot from this angle. And
yeah, and this is a great example. I think that what's nice about this one, I mean, the best part of this presentation is really showing the power of Magic Move, of just being able to animate those things. And you can use Magic Move for that. You could also use, at this point, you could use the animation tools to move little buttons like that. But the Magic Move is great because you just get it to where you want it and then go. The main thing is you have to create that slide ahead of time and make sure all the objects are in the first slide to make all that stuff work, because it has to be able to connect it. You're duplicating that slide and then doing a Magic Move between those slides is the easiest way to make sure that actually works.
Yeah, it was an interesting shoot, just the fact that the talent moved around. There were people in the set, so we had to move people out of the way from the front of cameras at various times, saying, hey, you're blocking a shot.
Right.
This was the traditional setup right here, which is a 2-shot. Ash actually was sitting up for 2-shot. And then I'll stop here because this just basically shows how we're using Magic Move and then, integrating it with that kind of stuff. It was just to explain what we did. It was a lot of fun. That's all I'll say.
And what I will say is that, again, Magic Move is a great example here, as well as lots of imagery is great. Like not having you won't see a lot of text because you're talking over it. You're talking about it. You're trying to you're explaining what that is. That's where the text should go, is in your mouth.
All right. Well, very good. So hopefully that just explains kind of the fun you can have in Keynote. Just explaining where the cameras are and these different camera angles.
Yeah, that's great.
All right.
All right. And so that wraps up our questions for today on Keynote. And we'll be taking a brief break before we let our educators in, right?
Yeah.
I assume.
Absolutely.
So 10 minutes good for everybody?
10 minutes is good for me.
All right. Hasmuk's leaving. We'll say goodbye to YouTube. If you want to join us,
Bye-bye,
you can
YouTube.
come. You can come in.
Sounds good. We'll see you in 10 minutes, 9:10.